Well, it is 6 p.m. on Monday, January 27th. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Winooski City Council. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Deputy Mayor Thomas Renner.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, agenda review. Any concerns with our order this evening?
No.
Okay. Public comments. I know you're here for an agenda item. And we do have one attendee on Zoom. So public comment is intended for members of the public who wish to speak to items not included on this evening's agenda. We do have time for public comments on every agenda item. So if you are here for public comment, please feel free to use the raise hand feature and let us know. All right, let's bring over Brian.
So I didn't realize you guys, I thought you were just asking us to jump in order. Is this to time for public comment? I want to make sure I'm respecting everybody's calendar.
Oh, yeah, if you have public comment about something not on the agenda tonight, if you're here for one of the public hearing items, I would ask you to please hold. We'll be at those soon.
I'll gladly lower my hand. It was for the just cause discussion.
Okay, we'll bring you over for that soon.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no public comment, we will move to the consent agenda. We have our City Council and Liquor Control Board minutes from January 21st, the payroll warrant for January 5 to 18, accounts payable warrant for January 22nd, job overview approvals for Department of Public Works, the Vermont Economic Progress Council Tax Increment Financing District Annual Report, and a resolution setting fees for Thrive. Any concerns with any consent agenda items?
I had just a clarifying question about F, but I don't know that it needs to come off.
Okay, yeah, you want to ask it?
I was just wondering why that wasn't part of our other fee conversation.
So you mean like the fee chapter?
Yeah.
I think that was done to, for expediency. Ray, can you, or Angela, if you want to pipe in here?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, so within the ordinance, it specifically says that the Thrive fees will be set annually by resolution. And so that's why we come back every year and set those as such.
So if it, because when it's an ordinance, you have to do hearings and so forth, so the Thrive fees are designed that way so that they can be acted on more quickly.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve? A motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second. Motion by Thomas, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Council reports. Can I start with you, Councilor Hurd?
Certainly. I don't have a whole lot to report. I did just get back from a conference in called Creating Change, and some of the takeaways I definitely want to share with our folks in Winooski. The biggest being that how important it is, local government is, and just how we can help do some really important work at the level that affects people most. So,
Thank you.
I do not have anything to report at this time.
All right. I will share last week the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission presented to our Planning Commission on Act 181, which requires changes to update regional land use maps across the state. The intent of those changes is to align local, regional, and state planning in service of meeting housing targets within planned growth areas and preserving rural landscapes like watersheds, forest, etc. The Regional Planning Commission previewed that Winooski's updated map won't change substantially from what we have in zoning right now. They're going to be coming back to a future meeting to provide more detail on specific impacts to Winooski related to those maps, the process they're going through for setting housing targets, and impacts of the Act 250 tiers. So those other changes coming out of Act 181. They also intend to engage our Housing Commission. At that meeting, the Planning Commission also revisited transportation demand management draft regulations. They set a public hearing for those at an upcoming meeting, and I'm afraid I don't recall the date that they selected for that at this time. I'll try to follow up. My other update is that I also, Deputy Mayor Renner and City Manager Elaine Wong joined me to present our proposed fiscal year 26 budget on Town Meeting TV, and that recording will be available on the city website. That's it for me.
There was going to be a Safe, Healthy, Connected People meeting tomorrow, but that has to be canceled due to commission members not being able to attend. So at this point, we will just be planning for our February meeting on the 11th. Last week, Councilor Oakleaf and I went to one of the senior living facilities in town to talk about the budget and to take the what's the official title, Elaine? The budget monopoly game.
Activity. We might succumb and start calling it a game for marketing, but it's still the budget activity officially.
Yeah, more important than a game, but
Correct.
but
Yes.
gamified to make it easy. So we took that to the residents there. We had a handful of folks show up, which was really nice. Some very involved members in the community in their building. And they had some good questions. We had some follow-up from that. And they played the game and allocated money pretty similarly to how we have been allocating our money. So that was good to see. They went a little heavier in on the police budget than we do, but still kind of fell within our existing percentages. So that was really interesting to see. Are you going to talk about the community dinner, the budget
Yes.
community dinner? Okay, then I'm all set.
I simply, due to the sheer number of meetings we've had this month, I don't have any updates.
Excellent, thank you. Moving on to city updates.
Yes, so speaking of, you are invited. Please join the City of Winooski and Winooski School District for the Our Taxes, Our Future City and School Budget event to learn about city and school budgets and what will be on the town meeting day ballot this year. This event is hosted by the Winooski Partnership Prevention and takes place on Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. That's next Tuesday. It starts at 4 p.m. at the O'Brien Community Center. We're expecting it to last until about 6:30 p.m. This is a family-friendly event, free and open to all, so please bring your families, friends, and neighbors. We'll have a buffet-style dinner provided by Winooski Restaurant, youth basketball in the gym for kids, and open house activities where you can play the budget game, which was developed by our finance director and featured on the local news. You can also learn more about progress on our equity initiative, next steps after which we're calling the next steps that follow the Winooski Together events that happened last summer. And of course, hear from special city and school guest speakers. For full details about this event and for all things ballot, budget, and election, please visit our website at winooskivt.gov/townmeeting. And if you can't attend, the annual Town Meeting Day informational meeting is the night before election on Monday, March 3rd, 2025, at 6 p.m. at the Winooski School District. If you have questions about the budget, you can always email budget@winooskivt.gov. And due to construction activities related to the Winooski Falls East Hotel and Garage project, sections of Abenaki Way and Winooski Falls Way will be temporarily closed to through traffic, meaning resident and emergency access only, from Tuesday, January 28th until Thursday, January 30th. For full details and to view the schedule and traffic control plan, please visit winooskivt.gov/7D. And this is just for a couple of days this year. It's not a year-long disruption.
Is that just vehicle traffic or pedestrian traffic as well?
Just vehicle traffic.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Elaine. We'll now move into our regular items. First up is Just Cause Eviction Charter Change Public Hearing. Jenny, would you like to introduce?
Good evening. So this is the first of two public hearings that we'll be holding on this voter-backed charter change amendment. This was originally on the March 7th of 2023 ballot, but due to a technical administrative error, it was recommended through the Vermont League of Cities and Towns that we have this ballot placed on our item. So essentially, we're going through the whole process all over again.
All right.
The next one will be February 3rd.
February 3rd is the next one, thank you. So, a public hearing has been noticed for the consideration of just cause eviction charter change. At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing and we can take public comment. I'll invite you, sir, up to the microphone. If you could please introduce yourself, your name and association with Winooski, and then share your thoughts.
Okay. Good evening. My name's David Bean. I am a landlord here in Winooski, but I'm also a realtor, so I have multiple reasons for wanting to be here and get informed.
Awesome.
Okay. I have a series of questions. Can I just run
Yeah,
through
go
my
ahead.
questions? Okay. In the write-up that you guys had, there's a date, March 4th, 2025. What does that date represent?
That's just the town meeting day vote, that folks would vote on this.
Okay.
So voters already approved this, and our representatives drafted a bill proposal that's in the state legislature already from last year. The legislature hasn't taken it up yet. It's their duty to approve or deny charter changes. So for something to go into effect, they would have to take that action and then send it back to us.
Okay. And that was my understanding. I didn't realize that there was a technical difficulty. I thought it had been passed, and this was more about the ordinances coming. Here's what
We're
you need
not
to.
there yet still.
Okay, so you might not have a lot of the answers to these questions, but, so the next meeting is the same purpose as this evening, correct?
More
Next-
public comment ahead of the vote, yeah.
Okay. And I was just curious on the purpose of the ordinance, like what is the rationale behind it? I'm assuming it has something to do with the housing crisis, but I thought I would get it from you guys on what,
My understanding is the purpose behind it. I didn't, this is a resident organized petition. I'm telling you what I have heard, and we'll let counselors chime in. But it's to put a protection in place for renters from being evicted without violating the lease or other just causes. I think it's a reaction to a lot of folks being no cause evict, like just having their leases ended because the person wanted to the landlord wanted to charge more rent than they could afford, just knowing that they could get more from a new renter. Does anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's good. It was brought to us by Rights and
Rights and
Democracy.
what was that?
Rights and Democracy was the organization that organized the petition and collected the signatures around town. Gathered enough signatures for the process to happen, essentially. And yeah, I think it was as a result of the housing crisis, a lot of folks in town being evicted and having spoken up. And then, yeah, it came to us as just cause. And one thing that I know that a lot of landlords brought up, I don't know if you have this question, but I'll just say it. A just cause would be not paying rent. So there was a big concern from landlords that this would stop people from paying rent and they won't be able to evict them. That would be a just cause to evict somebody.
Yeah, that part was clear. Okay. So if this were to pass, and then, so the permission to change the charter is what gets passed, and then it comes back for the ordinance to be crafted, correct?
Right. If the legislature approves this, and they have the authority to change the language, like they can do whatever they want, frankly, with our charter. So if they send something back to us, then we have to spend some time crafting ordinance around it and go through our regular public hearings process before adopting something. So there's quite a few steps that would be involved still.
Okay. And who would be responsible for drafting it at that point? And what sort of input would other residents or interested parties have?
The ordinance would be drafted by the city through staff and with the city's attorney. And at a minimum, I don't know if there's 1 or 2 public hearings required where members of the public could weigh in. Also, we have the option to do more engagement than that if we want to.
Okay.
We would likely work through our housing and planning commissions as well, which have resident representatives and are additional public meetings that folks can engage in.
Okay. Would there be an intention of having landlords be part of that?
Yeah, I would intend to have all stakeholders involved.
Okay. Okay. have a question about unintended consequences, and this came from the voters, right? So I'm not sure if this is the right audience to say, because I think through the unintended consequences of any action, right? Because I could see this raising rents, right? I could see landlords wanting to raise rents as a result of this, and then always raise rents every year to the maximum required or allowed, because there's some portion of this which sounds like rent control. And maybe it's too premature to talk to that, but can anyone speak to the ability to raise rent and set a reasonable rent increase so as not to form a de facto eviction? Who will determine what reasonable is?
That's language I imagine that the legislature will tweak before something comes back to us. And so then at this point, I would say it's too early to say who determines or what is reasonable. But I think it's a point noted, what you're making about unintended consequences, and that would be worth bringing back up in engagement around future ordinance development.
Yeah, okay. Because I know, like, I have great tenants, right? And I've had a great experience working with this city. You know, so I don't like to borrow trouble, but I like to be prepared. But I could see getting behind on rent, if you will, from an income perspective, as expenses continue to increase, right? Taxes just went up considerably. And I will say, if we can raise rent to the extent my taxes just went up, I will be fine with any rent control. There's an item in there about you can choose not to have someone renew the lease if you're going to do significant renovations and or put an immediate family member in there. And my concern around that is immediate family member and what entails that. You know, is that just father,
again,
daughter?
Yeah, there
brother,
would have to
sister?
be definitions in any ordinance developed
Yeah.
to clarify that.
Okay. So obviously the concern would just be how confining it is, right, for me as a landlord. I've got a situation, just to point, are any of you landlords?
Not at this time.
No, okay. I have a situation where I have a very good tenant, pays their rent, and works their lease, but I had someone else move out because they're just passive aggressive in the yard, right? You share a yard with someone, it's like any
Oh.
relationship, and I may choose not to renew that person's lease, right? Simply because it can become a hostile environment, and I try and mitigate that, so as any good landlord should. Again, substantial renovations would have to be defined. There's language in your write-up that talked about mitigating potential negative impacts on tenants and others. I'm assuming this has to do when you do not renew a lease with someone, right, with a just cause. And then it talks about mitigating potential negative impacts on the tenant or others. I'd be curious to know what you mean by others. And also, it talked about adequate notice, which of course makes sense, and then reasonable relocation expenses. And I'm not sure if that means if I choose not to renew someone's lease for just cause, am I as the landlord now responsible for some reasonable relocation expenses?
Yeah, I think this language that was put forward by residents is quite broad and would require a lot of refining through the legislative process and then again through ordinance. I couldn't speak to what mitigating potential negative impacts is. There would have to be some sort of, definition's the wrong word, but yeah, kind of definition on like reasonable relocation costs. I think what you're pointing out is all of the pieces that need more definition
Yeah.
and more clarity if we got to
Or
the point
even
of
why,
implementing.
like if I choose not to renew someone's lease for a just cause, I can't imagine why as a landlord I would be responsible for any relocation expenses. If there was a just cause, right, we just parted ways.
Yeah.
So that's troubling, of course. Then there's a reasonable probationary period after the initial occupancy, and I'm curious that obviously that would have to be defined, but is that for the tenant? Does that mean we can part ways within 90 days of someone taking over the lease? Because obviously if you sign a lease for 12 months, that's the term of the lease. There's no probationary period that I'm aware of, so that would be interesting language to introduce into leases.
I don't know what that means,
Okay.
to be honest.
Okay. And then rent increases, obviously, that's a big concern as far as what reasonable, that sounds like rent control. So is it the city's intention to control rent in the city?
I think that's the intention of this petition. I don't know what the legislature will come forward with. And then, as I said, if they approve something and send it back to us, then we have to go through the process of deciding what we intend to implement.
Okay. And then again, language here, landlords must provide notice of just cause as part of the lease agreement. So again, that's very vague. I'm not sure what that means. And that was all I had.
On the last one, my assumption would be that the lease language should probably say, like, these are just cause items, like egregious violation of lease, non-payment of rent. But that's something I think that the legislature would define.
Yeah.
It would be pretty obvious
I
for them
mean,
to do.
from a lease perspective, to me, the lease is the just cause. If you breach that contract, then you have just cause to terminate that lease and or not renew that lease. And then have you given any thought as to how this will be monitored, policed, enforced? Because I could see this becoming an administrative nightmare where I tell a tenant, I'm not gonna renew your lease because of this and this and this, right? Which it wasn't egregious enough for me to start the eviction process, right? But enough of a just cause to not wanna renew. And they might say, no, there's this new law in Winooski, you can't get rid of me, I'm staying, I paid my rent every month, right? So then we start to do that dance. And have you given any thought as to how that would play out?
No, we haven't spent the time on it because it is a significant amount of work it will be a significant amount of work to figure that out. And there's some question between, right now evictions is a civil matter that goes through the court system. What is the city's actual role in this process? That's gonna take some hashing out too, that I think we would need legislative guidance on as well.
Okay.
There are many outstanding questions.
Yes, okay. So the charter change hasn't been approved and therefore the ordinance not enough thought has gone into that. This has just
Correct,
been
yeah.
presented in this way to you guys and then pitched to the state in this way, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a couple of towns that pass either the same or very similar language. And I will be honest, I think this language, there's so much to be worked out. It's hard to predict what the legislature will move forward with. And so it hasn't seemed valuable to spend a lot of effort thinking through what implementation would be, because there's a lot of room for change in whatever comes back to us.
Right, okay.
And just to clarify, the way that the petition process works for charter changes, council cannot edit the language. So how it's presented, as long as that's signed and then voted by the voters, that's what goes in to the legislature.
So this rights group put this language together to get it on the ballot without input from the city?
Yeah.
And then the public voted on that? Okay.
And
They
the
collected
resident,
signatures to get it on the ballot, it got on the ballot, and then the city voted yes on the
Yep.
ballot
Yep.
measure.
Yeah, I was just wondering how this language, the confusing, vague language, was collected and presented.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I will also happily offer my time when you get to the stakeholder involvement.
Could be a while.
Yeah, that's
Please,
okay.
please pay attention in case forget to reach out at that time.
Okay. And what sort of time frame are we talking about here? Is the wheels of government?
Best case, if the legislature took action this session, there'd be some kind of law come May. The governor would need to approve it. If he didn't, then June, a veto session if it went through.
If everything up until having it here on the books, 2 years at the least, probably. By the
I
time
think
it
so,
goes through
'cause there'd
public
be
comment here.
A lot of months of internal work, public hearings process, outreach, legal review. It will be at least, I would say.
And
So
the
this-
legislature's
Probably,
likely
yeah.
not to take it up this year, it'll probably be next year if anything, so.
So early part of this year to get approval, and then at least another year to
I think so,
figure it all out.
realistically.
Because
Okay.
the goal would be to address all of the really valid points that you brought up, right? And not just kind of slap together something that doesn't hold any water.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously as a landlord I'm concerned, but also as a realtor, I could see this impacting prices as well, because I might be less interested in investing in Winooski when there's these types of control, other third parties having control over my property, which I'd be investing in, right? Or my ability to control my property and therefore provide a proper, comfortable, non-hostile environment for my tenants.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thanks for coming and raising
Okay.
the questions and then, offering to engage in the future.
all right, thank you.
Appreciate it. I know we have some online commentary as well. All right, Brian, you're back on.
Thank you, folks, for hosting this, and I don't know if that's a tech issue, but normally I'd have a camera on.
Oh.
So try to be respectful to everybody here. Hang on a second. No, I don't think I have an opportunity to put the camera on. So my name is Brian Armstrong, and I'm a 25-plus year housing partner of the city of Winooski. And I believe that the issues with eliminating no-cause eviction is one of equity and one of potential prejudice towards some of the most important members of the community. And those are the small business owners that work extremely hard to provide a safe place to live, to have housing, and often do so on very limited means. So I'd love to share a little bit of a story. My first amazing wife, rest her soul. She was actually on food stamps. She, raised by a Marine, worked her butt off to save enough money to buy her first property and build wealth for her son and for herself. I ended up marrying her as I met her shortly before that, that home was purchased. We had a building in Winooski, we own several now, rest her soul, where we had one tenant who, if the elimination of just or no cause eviction was taken through, a proud single mother may not have been able to buy that building. Because what we didn't have was egregious lease violations. The person was paying rent on time, the person, complied with city requests, but they were ultimately a hoarder, they were extremely misogynistic, mildly threatening to her, and if I wasn't in the picture, this mother who worked her way off of welfare would not have felt comfortable going to her own building. Now, the reason why I bring this story up is I'm extremely proud to share that we have very few, if any, evictions. And right now in Vermont, I don't know if you guys know this, but it takes 6 months on average to evict somebody. That's if it goes smoothly and if they don't request a jury trial. Now, if we were in Florida, where it takes 30 days to evict somebody, I think a just cause charter change could really make a lot of sense, because landlords in Florida just have 30 days to get someone out. So my history is when we've used no-cause evictions as a tool of last resort is one, where we have tried every reasonable thing, talking to the resident, talking to them about their concerns, the noise complaints, possibly if we're concerned they're drug dealing traffic, the short-term traffic that we see on the weekends, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, out-of-state license plates. And when I brought up these concerns before, people would say, well, if you're concerned you have a drug dealer in your building, the tenants, other residents, the valued other residents, will help you. My history is the valid other residents. There's so many great, we work with so many great residents of Winooski, that those people will not actually stick their neck out and consider going to court with us because they're concerned about their personal safety. So I also feel that, no cause is something that's used as last resort, and is probably, if I had to guess, if you check the court records, probably makes up less than 2 or 3% of the evictions that actually hit the court systems. But it serves an extremely valuable tool when goodwill, strong conversations, and all reasonable methods have been tried, shy of proving somebody guilty of such a either drug dealing or, fights with their spouse an entire time. Now, we are proud to acknowledge that we work with Section 8, Burlington Housing, Winooski Housing. We've put a lot of time into working with the immigration, I think it's Vermont Refugees and Resettlement, And we're so proud of so many of the residents that we work with, including 20-year residences, one that moved to this country, now is a a manager at the airport. We believe in providing safe, compliant, and reasonable housing. But my concern is if this charter change goes into effect, one, people who work hard to create the opportunity to provide themselves home ownership, possibly with an extra unit, maybe 2 or 3, will choose not to build wealth and not wealth as in Bugattis, wealth as in paying the bills on time for their family, because A, if they go to evict somebody, it already takes 6 months. And B, you're gonna be removing a last resort tool that really creates an equitable playing field in the state of Vermont, which again is averaging 6 months to evict somebody. So the questions I encourage the city to consider: one, how much have they budgeted for the potential lawsuits that will follow when terms like reasonable need to be found in court? How much has the city set aside to assist their small property owners in actually keeping the buildings afloat? I think last year, the city of Winooski, and I'm a huge fan of the city, I love it. I've been doing business here for 20 years, love the residents, love the police department. But one of my concerns is you're going to be bringing a very vague regulation which is going to be challenged in court. I also am concerned, will you see apartment owners choose not to invest in Winooski, or even worse yet, something that I now have to contemplate? Will they remove those units from the market by either A, turning them into small condos, which may help with some affordable housing, but it's going to take away long-term units away from the rental pool? If this charter had been in place before the redevelopment of so much Winooski, I'm hard-pressed to think of those investors looking for a fair return to provide a fair service would have invested, and we would have seen the buildup that we've seen in Winooski, which I think has been amazing for the tax base, amazing for the school systems, for the police department, and all the residents. And then help me understand this. With a 13.8% increase, I believe, in our taxes, in one apartment building, I had to raise rent $100 per month, per unit, just to break even with the economic impact that the city put on us. And this is meanwhile, plumber expenses are going through the roof. Inflation's going through the roof, so our vehicles cost more to manage. So we're having more expenses, and I don't know if you guys know this, but Allen & Brooks, which does an annual report on the Chittenden County real estate market, is forecasting that we're going to see a 3% vacancy rate in Chittenden County. That is already starting to level off rent effects. I will acknowledge with humor, it's really odd just talking to my name and not the group here, so forgive me on that. Other things that are disconcerting about this is if landlords are going to be subject to rent control, but our expenses as governed by the city can go up 14%, 13.8%. At what point does the city of Winooski and the very valued residents I love to serve saying to the people who take tremendous amount of risk, it's just not worth the risk, don't buy in Winooski, don't provide housing in Winooski? You know, so one of the things that I hope you guys will consider is what is an equitable direction forward? I love a very balanced playing field, and I love to provide housing in Winooski. This, unfortunately, will effectively provide the residents who I cherish and work with in providing housing. Some of them will effectively view this as a life estate. I can bust my butt to work hard to help a single mother provide for her son, and all they have to do is necessarily move in, and then it's going to take me forever and a day to be able to capitalize and recoup my expenses for tax increases, let alone from heating costs, let alone from increased rates of plumbers, of electricians. I think on the surface, this sounds really, really attractive to a lot of people, But I think unfortunately, it is going to eliminate residents of Winooski from potentially buying properties in their own city and providing housing, because it'll just make it too risky to do so. The landlord that I am, that was personally very hard, worked very hard to give everybody a fair shake, for the people who had maybe spotty references, worked out situations where we gave them a shot. Will it take landlords like me out of the process of giving people a shot and turning us more into, large companies who don't care about the humans that we serve and make a decision? Person either meets the AAA credit rating or they don't get a rental unit. Because if I can't take a risk on a subpar resident who I think is a really good person and really deserves a chance, because it's going to take me a year and a half to get him out, then I just have to only rent to the best. And that is not who I am, because I believe great people make poor choices at times and have hard times growing up, and we all deserve second chances. So I think if this is voted through, you'll be saying potentially yes to extremely large landlord outfits who do not have to care as much as the small landlords. You may be saying yes to large amounts of lawsuits, and you may be saying yes to seeing landlords possibly take their units out of the rental pool or even buy somewhere else. I love this city. I love being a part of it. I hope we can move forward in an equitable format and in a state that it takes me 6 months if somebody doesn't get a jury trial to move a resident out. It's any more pressures, it's good reason to get out of the housing providing business. I guess lastly, as I wrap up and I say thank you, I would welcome an email where I can send some information about towns that put in, rent control and later regretted it. And also hopefully raise awareness that this seems like a really easy place to say, hey, so-and-so is responsible for the fact my cost of living is so high. So-and-so is responsible for the fact that I have trouble making my rent. When in reality, this just scratches the surface. I would hope Winooski and its residents that I value would look at ways of helping make homeownership more affordable and home renting more affordable, not by increasing legal barriers to the small partners who wish to be part of the solution.
Thank you for sharing your comments, Brian. I just put my email in the chat. If you want to send any follow-up information, I'm happy to share that out.
Thank you.
Do we have any other public comments this evening? Okay. Seeing no further comment, I will now close the public hearing, and we will do this again next week. All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item B, on for discussion, the treasurer's report. Welcome, Jonathan.
Good evening, everyone. So unfortunately, I'm having some IT issues. So I'm able to access any of my documents. So I'll do my best from memory. So overall in Q2, FY25 Q2, a small surplus in the general fund decreased, which I believe is partly due to a decrease in the number of vacancies across multiple departments at Winooski. For example, I believe multiple police positions were filled since last time we spoke. Forecasted losses across enterprise funds grew, I believe, mainly as a result of ongoing construction projects for the city, like the Main Street Revitalization Project and the Abenaki Garage Project, which I believe is scheduled to conclude this spring, and it's currently on time to conclude this spring. At the request of Mayor Lott, I did add an extra table to the metrics page, which I hope makes side-by-side comparison between quarterly forecasts a little more easy. If not, please let me know, and I'm open to feedback. Okay, that's the best I can do from memory. Any questions?
Well, thank you. I did appreciate the table addition.
Okay.
Did anyone have any questions on this quarter's update?
Anything concerning on the horizon?
Overall, just the losses across enterprise funds just grew. So I just would keep an eye on just the Abenaki Garage project because I believe it's concluding this spring, but then I don't think we can start utilizing it for revenue until this fall, I believe. Is that correct, Angela? I see your video popped up. You're on mute.
We can't hear you,
Can't hear
Angela.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I wanted to make it clear that across the enterprise funds, while they're experiencing year-over-year losses, that is because the debt service associated with those construction projects came to us last fiscal year. So we are spending down those proceeds. So that is an intended loss to use that money. We're not paying for that with revenue that is received this year. And with the Abenaki Garage, even though we won't be able to use the garage right away, the way that we have designed the contracts for the hotel and housing is that they will need to start paying for their spaces based on their construction completion date that was estimated at the start, regardless of how long it takes them to finish those construction projects.
Thanks, Angela. That's all I had. Feel free to email me with any questions, jfenney@winooskipt.gov, and I'll make sure I get my computer looked at.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I didn't see anything alarming. Seems like things are tracking towards expectations.
Mostly, yes, since last time we spoke.
All right, any questions from members of the public before we move on from this item?
Have a good night, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to item C. Another public hearing on Unified Land Use and Development Regulations related to Act 181. Welcome, Ricky.
Where should I start? I think as discussed last month, this is a very straightforward revision to the Unified Land Use Development Regulations in response to Act 181. With the Act 181 changes, we have to allow for the usage of parking spaces in adjacent and nearby lots to count for meeting parking requirements, to allow for conversions of hotels and motels into permanently affordable housing, and then some small modifications to public noticing requirements. Bryn emailed me this morning with a couple really good questions about monitoring and evaluating parking on neighboring lots. To bring up her questions, the first question posed was, if property A has parking and property B and C do not want to use property A's parking, how will the city track capacity available versus parking committed through agreements over time? Good question. So with tracking usage of parking, we don't really do that, but we do track whether the use actually meets the required amount of parking spaces per the parking minimums table that's in the Unified Land Use Development Regulations. With any sort of parking to meet that utilizes off-site lot, there would have to be a shared parking agreement that would have to be agreed upon by both property owners. This type of legal instrument that is just a shared parking agreement by itself or within the deed documents would have to be provided to me with a change of use application or a development application, and that would have to be recorded in the land records. So that would show up in any title search when a property changes hands, and that would show to us that both properties are in compliance with the parking minimums that are in regulations. Because a development needs parking, I would also have to make sure that the parking that is utilizing from a different site is also in compliance itself. We wouldn't want to create nonconformities and irregularities over time, so both would be checked for compliance at the same time. So that's how we would track parking across different lots. And I've used a standard form for these types of shared parking agreements, having reviewed these types of applications in the past. Bryn's second question was, what's to stop property A from overcommitting its parking space with others? This would be to review both lots, to check for compliance. So when a development is under review that chooses to utilize parking off-site, the off-site lot would have to be checked for compliance too, to ensure that there are no irregularities that happen with this type of development agreement and development in general. And the third question is, what will the city do in the event of conflicts or errors when property A changes ownership or use when they no longer want to share their parking? So since it's in the land records or in deed documents, it's all tied together. So there would have to be some sort of legal arrangement in order to take that out, and they would have to work with me in order to ensure that the property in question that is using parking off-site still remains in compliance. So it would be pretty complicated to untangle it just because of how tied up it is with the property and the property rights itself after those arrangements are made. At this point, I'll take any other questions that you might have.
Well, let me first formally open the public hearing, as has been noticed, for the consideration of amendments related to Act 181, and see if there are any questions from members of the public. Okay, hearing none, I will now close the public hearing, and we'll move into item D, which is discussion or approval of the amendments. See if there are additional questions or comments from councilors. Were your questions answered?
I was gonna ask a follow-up question, but you want to-
Go ahead.
Just on that last one, see if I can figure out how to phrase my question. So for a property that is utilizing off-site parking spaces, like what if there's maintenance issues? What if there's construction needs? What if there's, I'm just thinking about all the if-then scenarios that aren't really captured here, and what the externalities could be on the community because we didn't really think ahead of some of those if-then scenarios.
Yeah, that gets a little bit more complicated just because on my end, I would just check if both properties are in compliance with the regulations on paper, ensure that the paper is recorded, signed, countersigned, recorded, and then that's that. Whatever happens in terms of certain occasions where there might not be parking available because of construction on site, or if there's some maintenance issues that ends up being a civil matter that's outside of my purview. I mean, I'd want to help to try to facilitate those conversations, but there's not really much of a role for me there in those short-term, maybe even single occasion type of situations. It's just something beyond my control.
And I think we're presuming that this would be private owner to private owner agreement.
Yes,
Typically.
Typically. It could also be like private to public, just like with our parking garages.
Right. So, in thinking about various scenarios, and some of the issues that we may need to account for either in our own guidance or some type of policy understanding, so that when predictably issues come up, you have some place to refer back to, because I would say the ordinance probably is not the best place to capture all of those situations and scenarios, but thinking like, what about, so in the instance where the city has an agreement to provide spaces, but access needs to be limited for maintenance reasons or for safety reasons or who knows, what have you. Like, how, in those cases, how then would parking be managed for temporary or a permanent change where that usage is no longer available?
If I may, I don't think that question is specific to this arrangement. I think that would apply to any rental property with, or any property with parking.
Yeah, I was using it as an example.
Fair enough. Just, I don't think it's something we have to hash out for this specific thing, is what I'm saying.
That's fine. I think you all probably get the point of the matter that this is not just a one sentence change, right? There are a lot of things and implications that go into whether or not this actually is going to play out as intended. Yes, we may be required by law to make some of these changes, but there are instances where this could cause a lot of stress on our city staff to try and navigate the if-then scenarios and impact on our community. So,
But I'm saying I don't
that's my
understand how shared off-site parking causes a new problem. I think what you described is a problem that could be seen on any existing property in the city. If the duplex next to me does maintenance and all 6 of their tenants have to park on the street, it's the same kind of impact.
So I'm not sure what it is you're saying.
I don't understand how the scenarios you're describing are caused by this amendment.
By this change,
Yeah.
by the removal.
Whether or not the parking is on-site or off-site, that problem could exist.
I see, okay.
It's,
I got you.
because I mean, this on paper is just a reallocation of resources essentially, right? That if you don't have enough resources on one, then you could use resources that another property entity might have that they have excess of to compensate. Doesn't really affect, the access part is tangential, but it is a completely separate matter that is in a completely different section. Especially with those very specific instances, like when maintenance happens, like that is at least beyond my control. It might be under code enforcement's purview because they might need building permits, but it is beyond my control. But in this case, in terms of the scope of it, it's just a reallocation of a resource and turning a resource that is privately owned into something that is like limited common pool in a way. And with this too, it's in my experiences, it's only been in very limited instances because property owners tend to covet their parking because they view it as a valuable resource for their property because they put in the capital and the resources to build out that parking lot that is fairly expensive to build. So that's for one. And then with these shared resources too, just because of how entangled they get, it's just not seen that common. Considering our smaller lot sizes, our private properties with limited parking, I mean, maybe I'll see it for like a handful of spaces to transfer over, but I don't foresee seeing many of these just because of the nature of our built environment and how people treat their relationship with an interface with parking in general.
Okay.
To the broader question, it's something we could revisit in a different
Yeah,
aspect.
yeah. I don't think it's appropriate for some of those things to be captured within the ordinance. I think having a guidance document can be helpful at some point in time, just to refer back to and to honestly share with other people that have questions.
Do other counselors have questions? Okay. Does someone want to make a motion to approve the amendments to the Unified Land Use and Development Regulations for Act 181?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Thomas, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
Thanks, Riley.
Sorry, I'm just taking a note. Okay. Moving on to item E, on for discussion, review of anticipated demands on reserves. Elaine will introduce this. I will call out, I saw in the packet, You're providing us information, you're not soliciting direction tonight.
Yes, thanks. And my regrets, I will be talking for quite a while. So first, a primer on what reserves are and why a city government would have any. You all, 5 of you, of course, know this very well, but for the benefit of the public, especially when we are only charging for services to render and we're not a for-profit entity. Why would we have reserves? So municipalities have reserves when we get more revenue than we spend. Ideally, municipalities only take in the amount of revenue that we need to spend or are required to have in reserve. In practice, this rarely happens, and generally this is because it's impossible to predict down to the dollar what the revenue will be when most of the revenue is coming from property taxes, and there's change in property owners, there might be a hardship unexpectedly, that sort of thing. There can also be reasons specific to how a municipality operates that can make it more likely to have reserves. In Winooski's case, when we do have reserves, it's often because we haven't been able to fill a vacancy. Sometimes we have savings because we have a practice of budgeting for the most expensive scenario for open positions, with the biggest uncertainty being the health plan a new employee will take. So even if we replace an open position with during the same fiscal year that it was vacated with a less expensive health plan or wage, and then the savings might contribute to increasing reserves so long as those savings might contribute so long as other expenses are about as expected. We also still have money from the American Rescue Plan Act grant that offset COVID-19 expenses that happened in previous years from the grant. And also note that thanks to work by Angela and the action of council, the city of Winooski has non-property tax revenue from interest-bearing certificates of deposit, or CDs, contributing to our reserves. So all that background out of the way, currently, as you can see in the packet, we have $3,518,028 in general fund reserves, also known as the operating fund balance. So we use those terms interchangeably. So in the packet also is the reserve balance tracking sheet that the finance director maintains. It shows the balances assigned by council in the top portion, either by policy or by council action more recently across all the funds. At the bottom, there's a list called potential future assignments. Angela and I started these potential future assignments so that we could maintain a picture of the forest, so to speak, and not just each tree as it was brought to my attention. And for the same reason, I'm reviewing it for council now. The plan is to review this list at key moments throughout the year for council. Currently, these are likely to include at the beginning of a council service year and just before budgeting starts at the council level, when Christine and I, the current mayor, and I were discussing. And then in terms of when the budgeting starts, it would just be prior to the city manager's budget proposal presentation at the beginning of December. So I'm reviewing this, though, today because we are anticipating that there might be a grant opportunity we can apply for coming up. It remains to be seen if we have the staffing capacity, but it is coming up. So it also has a 20% match requirement that would need to come out of reserves. So we wanted to give this picture to you now. So note that the city doesn't have a policy for how reserves are allocated, although the capital improvement policy prioritization criteria are a good starting point. Those are in the cover sheet. I won't go over it now because I'm not asking council for direction, but they are there for your consideration for future requests until we've had the time to bring you a proposed policy on reserve use prioritization. So now I'll go over each potential future assignment. Feel free to ask if you have questions about them, but please don't expect that we will have the answers now. Because they are only potential assigned, so we haven't done all the research necessarily. If and when we ask you for a decision, we will have more information then, so if you do have questions now, it will inform what we bring to you then by way of information. So going top down, Main Street. So that allocation is for, because Green Mountain Power would not have needed to underground their power lines on Main Street just yet. But of course, it's more cost effective to do so while we have the road open for the Main Street Revitalization Project. And that amount is what they are charging us for that work, since the timeline is driven by the city. There is one possible grant opportunity for that, which we would have to contract to apply for. It's It's potentially on the table. The timing of when we have to pay those monies, though, to GMP might dictate whether or not it's worth pursuing that grant or not. That's a bit of an open question. The Champlain Pedestrian Bridge. This is the pedestrian bridge between Winooski Falls Way and the Champlain Mill. I will say that the Champlain Mill and the city disagree as to who owns this bridge. In the meantime, it is in disrepair, and we are collaborating with getting in a temporary repair, which we understand should be sufficient for some time. It is taking some time, though, to get the request for proposals out for the repair because of more pressing public works priorities, so we don't have an estimated cost yet. Eventually, next item down, the bridge will likely need to be replaced, and we don't have a cost for that either. Of course, staff will try to negotiate that cost, but in the meantime, I have it on the list so that it's captured somewhere as a potential expense that the city will have to bear, but may have to bear. The next item, if the fiscal year 2026 budget passes as proposed by council, will come off this list as the firehouse design is among the capital improvement plan items. Lot 9 brownfields. So for the public's reference, Lot 9 is what the city calls the open land between the Champlain Mill and the Burlington-Winooski Bridge, owned by the Winooski Hotel Group, or WHG as we call it for short. WHG has a development agreement with the city that references that it's a brownfield site. There's brownfield concerns there. WHG and the city are in litigation right now, so I won't comment further on this potential expense, except to say that, like all of these, it's possible for the city as an expense, so that's why it's on the list. The rotary rectangular rapid flashing beacons, I always forget what that stands for, are RFBs. Last year, council and staff fielded a lot of concern from the public after a pedestrian had a near miss at the crossing by the post office and their dog was sadly struck and killed by a vehicle. There was public interest in a pedestrian activated signal at that corner, like there is at the bottom corner on the same side. These are called rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Staff did some research, and the top corner actually does not have much of a record for crashes of any kind. Actually, no area of the rotary has much of a record of crash. Of course, even a near miss is too much, but we do need to consider taxpayer affordability when considering expenses. That's why staff have not yet proposed anything. However, after some other research, staff did confirm that the characteristics of the rotary do make it a good fit for RRFBs. So if council wanted to make that basically a policy choice or spending choice, there is no technical reason not to do it. This is the potential expense that would be suitable for an upcoming grant opportunity. The question there would be, one, whether to apply at all, assuming staff have enough time to write the application, and if so, two, how many to apply for. We could apply for one at each corner. At an estimate of about $40,000 per crossing, the match would be $8,000. The match is $8,000 each. So more details about this will come to you if we are able to apply for that grant. If you have any questions about this, please email them to John and me in the meantime. Vault Electrical, actually, I failed to update that spreadsheet that could have come off. We're able to cover that repair without needing reserves. So we'll update that spreadsheet accordingly. The next item, staffing model analysis. This amount, just to be clear, is a complete placeholder. I have no idea what it would cost. Still don't have a good estimate despite us going out to bid for this project because no one was able to deliver what we'd asked for. We have been working very slowly with a local firm to try to make progress where we can, but the question of whether we can be more efficient at our current staffing level, which is what we're trying to ask them to help us with, that work, trying to answer that question keeps getting pushed down the list because other priorities keep coming up. So, unfortunate irony. Again, this is on the list because something does need to happen on this front, and it's a way to at least keep track that it is likely to come with a price tag. Burlington-Winooski Bridge, this project we all know about. This is the current amount we expect we'll need for this fiscal year. Bonding was authorized, which will make up the rest. The wastewater treatment plant floodproofing. We did apply for a FEMA implementation grant for this last year, but that round of grant funding was frozen by the federal government in the fall last year because FEMA was going to run out of funds for imminent life safety needs for disasters that year. And there's no word yet on when more implementation funds may be released, if ever. Meanwhile, John is working towards having this put out for bid and in place for spring flooding season, because it would not be smart to wait on a grant and potentially have a much more expensive project to do if we suffer a loss at the plant. Garage cameras, this is for Abenaki Garage. We're working on an RFP for this. One of those items that is important, but not more important than, say, a water line break or issue with Main Street construction project, which is why this hasn't been completed yet, as in terms of the RFP being finished and published. A garage supplemental lighting, and that's a detailed supplemental lighting. So this project was suggested by Town of Winooski as a way to increase the feeling of safety in the parking garage. We've worked for years with the same electrician, which has become harder and harder to get the attention of. But since there is lighting now and there isn't anything broken, this has not been a top priority for us to chase down a cost for. Self-contained breathing apparatus financing gap. So we talked about this expense during budget time. Council had questions about the FEMA firefighter assistance to firefighters grant. Staff answered those questions via the council budget question and answer document. The key part of that answer was about the timing. We do need to be replacing units very soon, whereas staff are concerned if we wait until a potentially unsuccessful grant before financing, we will have some failed units. If that Q&A document didn't answer all your questions, though, please let us know. And finally, GMP Special Assessment Council just decided on the last couple weeks for fiscal year 2026, so I won't belabor that here. Any questions for now?
A couple of questions. In regards to the Main Street utility undergrounding, so I know that Green Mountain Power wants us to pay for it because it wasn't on schedule. They do have a company statement that they're planning to underground lines, and they requested money from, I forget which board they report to, but whichever board they report to, so that they can raise fees to do so.
Easy.
Thanks, Brent. So is there any negotiation ability, seeing as they would be doing this on their own dime, and now they're trying to get us to cover the entire thing? I understand that we moved forward their plan, so I understand paying for some of it. And correct me if I'm wrong, if we already do have an agreement and we're only paying for some of it and not all of it. But I do think that they're putting a cost on us that they would have done, that they have stated that they're going to do anyway.
I'd have to follow up with John. They recently met regarding the timing. I suspect, actually, no, I take that back. I did sign an agreement, so I'd have to check on the details of that. I signed it, I don't know, maybe a year ago now.
Okay. And again, understand if we need to pay some of it because we moved the timeline, but I feel like we shouldn't have to pay for all of it.
Quickly, I just want to
Yeah.
second that, and they also benefit. Like, this is improving their service.
No, that's why they're taking out the money to
infrastructure,
do
right?
it,
Like-
because they know that they don't have to service the lines as much once they're underground, which is, I knew there was something, so I Googled the WCX story about it. It's their plan by 2030 to underground all of the lines, and they're going to be paying for that themselves. So I just feel like they're getting us to pay for something they're going to do.
Yeah, we should follow up on that one.
I can send you that story too if
Please
it makes
do.
it easier for you. And then on the, excuse me, the grants for RRFBs and SCBAs, two fun acronyms. I know that in the past we've talked about there being, I think it was Heather, but maybe it's someone else, somebody that we can use for grant work if we don't think that staff has the capacity. Is this something that could be a possibility, given, at least for the RRFBs, we know that the community has expressed keen interest. I think a couple councilors have as well. And if we can do it for 8,000 instead of 57,000, that would be very nice. And then as far as the SCBAs, I don't know if that grant's available anymore. But if it is, again, if that third party could do it, that might be beneficial.
Yeah, I'll check in with John about, he hadn't had time to review the grant application guidelines yet. The first phase was very easy, so he got that taken care of.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was going to review that to see if he had capacity for that. But yeah, we'll answer that question hopefully in time.
Okay.
Can I?
Although that the one third party, it is Heather, that we always check with her first, because she's so familiar with the city.
Yep.
I'm not sure that she's available until March, so that might not work. That would not work out if that's the case. She might have, but she answered about something else, which was a lot bigger, so we'll check.
Okay, thank you.
Follow-up question. I know this is gonna sound like blasphemy. Has there been any consideration of using AI to help write grant language, at least draft it, as a first pass?
I don't know if we've thought about that. Even just having the time to read the grant application is step one. And actually AI does do that, and the municipalities, when I've been to the workshops about AI, they say that. It's like, have them summarize the grant application for you. So, yeah, it's a possibility.
I mean, tools are out there. People are using them.
Yes, they
Work
are.
smarter, not harder.
Just double check it.
Whoa, well, I'm
Of
saying,
course.
not filing that one.
Yeah.
First pass. Definitely not the way to be finalized and go with.
One thing to flag for AI, if you do use AI to create a document, you do need to disclose that you have done so. It is required in the agreements for AI.
And I think that and adding language like, due to our limited size, our limited capacity, we are utilizing and leveraging tools that are available to us as support to help build the justification for this. I don't think it's that abnormal.
It's not.
It's uncomfortable for me to lean into AI, but here I am trying to make sure that we're not missing opportunities. Just one opinion. It's just one opinion.
Yeah, Paul's been waiting for me to make him create a policy, an AA policy, and not really thrilled about it because we should probably have
I could say that
one.
there are different tools out there. Some are better than others, and some are more secure than others to use.
I'm happy to chime in too. I mean, I agree with you. It is an amazing tool, and when used correctly and appropriately, it's definitely a worthwhile venture. We do need to, I think, first before we get into that, do have some sort of policy on the books. Like Elaine said, we have been
I'll
talking
draft
about it.
one for you.
Well, the really
there's-
funny thing is ChatGPT can draft a very good policy. I know because during the Vermont Town and City Managers Association conference, we had a session on AI, and we had a brainstorming session on an AI policy. It's like, what you go in it? And one of the managers just Googled it right, ChatGPT'd it right there and read it off. And the professor who was instructing the workshop was like, that's actually pretty good. What am I doing here? So, we'd still have to vet it. We have to talk about how feasible all the pieces are. It still takes time even if it's drafted.
That's fine. I just don't want the lack of a policy to be used as the excuse for not utilizing tools, because we haven't had policies and procedures in place for many things, and we still go ahead in absence of that. Whether or not it's recommended, I know that we've done that in the past. So if something's missing, then let's tackle it so that we can ensure that we're leveraging tools that are available. Again, one opinion.
The only other thing I'll say about it too is this is not in offense, or to be against it. I'm actually all for it as a tool, and I think it could be great. The other, just as a note for everybody to take, during the beginning part of my research into language access, of course, AI generated models have come up quite a bit. And we spoke pretty extensively with the Vermont Office of Racial Equity, and they certainly had their fair share of concerns about using it, specifically when discussing interpretation and written translation, but the other implications too about organizations who use it. So just want to say that out loud so we're all thoughtful about those implications if we move in that direction to use it.
I think there are different uses for it, for sure.
Well, in any case, any decision to apply for grant and use this money or hire a third party would need to come back to city council. And I also want to acknowledge, for staff's sake, even beyond the application process, they also need to know what monitoring looks like and reporting and additional requirements. If we get the money, what are we obligated to? Can we accommodate that?
Let me know how I can help.
Any other questions on reserves?
Do you have, for all the things that are pending quote, do you have those out for proposal or to search for a quote, or is it just?
No, the ones that don't have numbers on them, I mean, I told you the ones that aren't, I don't think any of them are out because of capacity.
Yeah, okay.
There are some that are higher priority than others, like the Champlain pedestrian bridge.
Right.
All right, well, I appreciate the overview and that we can get into a more regular cadence of it so we remember what is on the plate, the bigger picture.
Yeah.
That is the end of this evening's agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Thomas, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank
Oh,
you.
motion carries.